everybody. Thank you for coming and spending your lunchtime with us. My name is Emily Seymour. I work for the consumer group Which. I am the energy editor there. And I'd like to introduce our fantastic panel today to talk to us all about heat pumps and heating your homes with low carbon technology. So first we have Bethan.
Hello, everybody. My name's Bethan Ellis. I work for the UK government for the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, and I head up the delivery of the Boiler Upgrade Scheme, which provides grants for transitioning your homes to heat pumps.
Thank you very much. We also have Russell.
Hi, everyone. I'm Russell Dean from Mitsubishi Electric.
Can we hear you?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, that's better.
I'm Russell Dean from Mitsubishi Electric, and we are a UK-based manufacturer of heat pumps. We've manufactured heat pumps in the UK for nearly 20 years, and I've been with Mitsubishi for 20 years focused on heat pumps. So, thank you.
And probably needs no introduction, but a very warm welcome to George. Would you like?
Hi, I'm George Clarke, architect and TV presenter for Channel 4. I have to put it out there and confess that I am the brand ambassador for Mitsubishi Electric air source heat pumps. But I'm brand ambassador because I love the product and I love what it does, genuinely. It's not just because they pay me.
And George, so you do have a heat pump in your home, is that right?
Yeah, I do. Look, all cards on the table. I want to live as clean a greener life as I possibly can. There might be some climate change deniers out there, but I don't buy into any of that. I think we're seeing some of the most kind of extreme weather conditions happening over the last 20, 30 years. You just have to look at the floods that have been happening in Italy and Spain recently, some of the devastation from more extreme hurricanes and tsunamis, and it's you just look at what we're doing to the planet, and it's nuts. I mean, it really is nuts. We're kind of of everything that it's got from all those natural resources. We're just constantly mining and digging and then burning and burning and burning and burning. And all that burning is just pushing up the temperatures all the time. I mean, my mum's quite happy about that in Sunderland because she'd love it to be 2 or 3 degrees warmer. But, you know, joking aside, it's a really serious point, and I think anything that we can do to reduce our carbon emissions on the journey to net zero is really important. And obviously, I'm an architect. I'm passionate about homes. I'm passionate about home innovation. You know, homes are my brand, really. I get involved in other building types, but 99% of the projects that I do, it's all about home innovation and home design. And you just think about the amount of fossil fuels that we're burning to heat our homes every day, whether you're on an oil-fired boiler or a gas-fired boiler. It just doesn't make sense to keep doing that if there's an affordable and cleaner, greener way of doing it. Now, kind of cards on the table a little bit. I know we're going to dig very deep into this, but I think the 2 biggest issues that we've had in the industry is, one, telling people that it can be affordable and showing them how it can be affordable. I have to be honest again, in some instances it might not be affordable because if your house isn't insulated to a really good level, then an air source heat pump might not work at the level that you're used to with your conventional radiator gas boiler system. But we've got ways of getting around that, and we help and advise how people can do it as well. But then there's also now the government have really, really stepped in. They've really stepped in. You probably wouldn't have even heard about air source heat pumps even 5 or 6 years ago. And now it's absolutely the headline from government to say we would love the UK to transition from burning fossil fuels to using air source heat pumps for the hot water and the heating for your home. So therefore, we're going to give you a £7,500 grant. You don't have to pay it back. It's not a loan. £7,500 towards the cost of your new air source heat pump installation. So it's phenomenal that we've been working together for many years, actually, but it's really been in the last, I would say, 3 years where people have gone, do you know what, we think we can do this, and we want to look into it more. And one of the reasons why we're here today, and we've got the Mitsubishi Electric stand here, so even after this, I'll be on the stand for a little bit if you want to come and say hi. It's to make people aware of the technology because everyone's a little bit worried about it, and I understand that.
Yeah. I think that's probably a really good opportunity to hop in and potentially ask Russell, who's here from Mitsubishi, if there's anyone listening who perhaps is a bit confused as to what an air source heat pump even is. As you said, it's a technology that's been around for a long time, but it's only really recently come into kind of the public consciousness. We know that, homes unless you're doing an awful lot of long-haul flying, then the way that you heat your home is probably one of the biggest things that you do in your lifetime to contribute towards carbon emissions, climate change. So changing the way that you heat your home is probably the biggest step you can take towards living, as you said, a much greener life. Now, in a lot of cases, that means an air source heat pump. But, Russ, what actually is an air source heat pump? Can you give us a kind of potted explanation?
Yeah, so, I mean, you're welcome to come to the stand and have a look at one, but an air source heat pump is a unit that sits outside of your home. And basically what it's doing is it's scavenging as much energy as it can from outside, and it heats your home, replacing your gas boiler or your oil boiler. It connects to traditional radiator system, underfloor heating system. Like I say, the technology's been around for a long, long time. It's very similar to a fridge at home. So what's happening in your fridge at home is we're taking the heat out of your fridge and putting it out the back of the fridge. What the heat pump's doing is the opposite to that, and it's scavenging energy from outside and bringing it into your home. By scavenging that energy, heat pumps become really efficient. So the average heat pump system will be about 300% efficient, and the top performing ones will be over 500% efficient.
So
We should have had one on stage. We should have done like a proper demonstration and everything as well.
I can go and get one.
It is mad technology though, because I'll be honest, I didn't really know enough about it, and I'm supposed to be an architect at the forefront of home innovation. So when I went to the factory, 10 years ago or something like that now, 8 years ago, and they took me through how it worked, you kind of think, it's mad. You've got this unit with a fan on it, and the fan's turning outside your house. And it's super quiet, by the way. It's not like having a really noisy air conditioning system that you might have been used to in other buildings. And that fan is just picking up any heat in the air outside. Now, even if it's like -3, -4, -5 degrees, it still picks up a tiny amount of heat that's in the external air. And then it compresses it. And it compresses it so much that it makes that heating element unbelievably hot. And then your hot water is basically being heated by that element. It's mad. There's no gas. There's no nothing. Obviously, you need some electricity to power the unit, and this is why we've always got to do the calculation about offsetting cost. Because you do, hopefully, if you were using electricity from a renewable energy supplier, then you're ticking every box to be clean and green with your home.
I think George made a really good point there that to kind of really focus in on is these work at really cold temperatures. Scandinavia, they've got heat pumps everywhere, and that reaches kind of -10, kind of even colder than that. And these heat pumps are still amply keeping those properties at a comfortable temperature. And I think people will see on the news a lot about a heat pump can't properly heat my home. Are there going to be periods of kind of cold spells? Not at all. These technologies can keep your property at a comfortable temperature all year round, irrelevant of the external air temperature, because they're scavenging that kind of energy that's available in the air.
Can I just jump in and give an example, actually,
of
a project recently? So I've been making a new series called Building Home. We put the first 4 episodes out in February. It's about people moving back to the place where they were born or where they were brought up, and renovating an old building or building a new one. And the guy who was doing the build, he was an architectural technician, so he had a lot of technical knowledge, and he was asking me about forms of heating and what he should do. And he was like, should I use an air source heat pump? I don't know that much about them. Now, he's an architectural technician. He should know about all technology in buildings, but it was just so new even for him. And he went, yeah, but I've heard they're really expensive, really expensive. I said, well, look, why don't I get one of the team to design it for you, to design the system, price it up, and see what it comes in at. And in fairness, he had this very, very drafty old building, but he was doing a huge amount of work to thermally insulate it. So he was packing it out with insulation. It also wasn't the biggest house in the world either. It wasn't like he had a 20-bedroom house. It wasn't a mansion. I said, honestly, this is like the best property ever to have an air source heat pump. It's not like a 12, 15-bedroom house. We can still do it for a 12, 15-bedroom house. You just need a bigger system. I said, but the size of your house and so well insulated, you'd be mad to not use an air source heat pump. And he went, yeah, I know, but I can just put like a really cheap gas boiler in there. Gas is cheap at the minute, and and he's like, I feel bad about it. So we designed the system for him. And when he got the £7,500 grant from government, so the installation cost was going to be more than a gas boiler installation. There's no doubt about that, right? His gas boiler installation would have been about 4,500, 5,000 quid. And the air source heat pump installation was going to be about 10 grand, 9,000 to 10,000 quid. But he got £7,500 up front from the government. So the entire cost for him for a brand new air source heat pump system was 800 quid. That was cheaper than the cost of having a replacement gas boiler. That's me not just selling it. That is a classic, bang up to date example of how he's got a more clean, green energy system that performs really well. And because he's got so much insulation in the building, we can talk about operating costs and things like that later, but that system's just not being put under any pressure at all. It's just very gently, very gradually just ticking over, providing the hot water for his underfloor heating system and the hot water to his taps as well. And it's also been worked on a programmer and a timer that it's just buying cheap electricity as and when he can get his hands on it, and then he stores that energy in a little battery. So it's so cheap compared to his gas system. So it's cleaner, greener, and because of the government help, it's turned out to be a lot cheaper.
And I mean, we hear so much about insulation and these types of technology going sort of hand in hand. And I think it is really worth pointing out that if you have a drafty home that's losing a lot of heat, then your air source heat pump's going to have to work harder. You're bringing in you're heating up water to heat your central heating if it's all disappearing out through the roof. But that's true of a gas boiler as well.
Or an oil-fired boiler.
So I think that's a really good point to
exactly.
make, is that all you're doing with an air source heat pump is using a different type of technology to warm up hot water, which is then making its way into your radiators. So the more heat you keep in your home, the better, regardless of where you begin.
Yeah, I mean, I'm jumping in again, but
yeah, of course.
Both me and Russ and all of the team at Mitsubishi would say you have to go for a fabric-first approach before you do any tech. Fabric-first approach is you get rid of all your drafts, insulate as much as you possibly can. If you've got leaky, drafty, single-glazed windows, if you can afford to do it, take them out and get some double glazing in there as well. So by doing insulation, double glazing, getting rid of all the drafts, putting on draft excluders, all of that stuff you should do anyway. Yeah. Whether you have an air source heat pump or a gas-fired boiler, it doesn't matter. Because if you don't do any of that, you're just wasting any of the heat energy that you're putting into your house. But once you've done that and you've insulated really well, an air source heat pump is going to perform absolutely brilliantly.
And why is it that they're linked so closely with that fabric-first principle? Like I know that a lot of people maybe say, well, like my home couldn't have a heat pump because it's not got enough insulation or whatever. Is that because the temperatures don't get as high as they would with a gas boiler?
I think historically heat pumps would give a flow temperature to your radiators 45, 55 degrees. And that's a really good way of sizing a heat pump system. But the new range of heat pumps now can give flow temperatures up to 75 degrees. So it's almost a direct replacement
on a par
for a
with
gas
a boiler,
boiler.
yeah.
But the reason why heat pumps, there's a lot of talk about the cost of running a heat pump in an old home. And that's purely because electricity is so expensive. So electricity now, from the 1st of April's 27 pence, and gas is 6 pence. So electricity is 4-5 times more than gas. And that's being a challenge. But if you look now, most energy providers, most utilities will have a heat pump tariff. And most of them are pitched around 14 to 15 pence a kilowatt hour. So if you get a heat pump and you hook into one of the heat pump tariffs, there's a 30-40% saving there on electricity for your heat pump. It's a massive saving.
And there's also, I mean, you mentioned earlier that these heat pumps are running at, some of them you said up to 500% efficient, some of them more like 300. So what does that mean in terms of how much you're paying to put energy in compared to what's coming out?
It's a question of how much do you want to spend to make your home efficient. If you want to spend to make your home really efficient, you can get a heat pump system up to 500%. It's about how much capital cost you want to put out. Do you want to go for triple glazing? Do you want to go for extra insulation? I think heat pumps now are very efficient, and like I say, getting access to that cheaper electricity make it the cheapest way of heating your home by far.
And we've got Bethan here, who's from the Department for Energy and is very involved with what is called the Boiler Upgrade Scheme, I think. Could you talk to us a little bit more about if somebody is ready for a heat pump, or maybe they think they need to do a bit of renovation first, maybe install some insulation, then they're ready to install a heat pump. What is coming from the government? How do we get that money? What's available?
Yeah, so as many people have already mentioned, there is a scheme called the Boiler Upgrade Scheme. We launched the scheme back in 2022. and we are still very much running. The scheme offers grants of £7,500 for the installation of a air source heat pump. There are also things called ground source heat pumps that we've not spoken about. They can actually reach higher efficiency, but they tend to be a bit more costly on the purse due to kind of additional kind of infrastructure. And yeah, what the government does is that we offer these upfront grants. Now, what's really important to note is that the process is incredibly easy as a property owner. The whole process, or the vast majority of the process, is led by the installer. So the installer makes the application on your behalf, they then redeem the voucher on your behalf, and then they slice the cost off your upfront payment to them. So what that means, as kind of George said, is that you could be paying your installer £2,000 with very little kind of faff in terms of admin. So it's a really, really easy process. I think what the government would suggest is if you are kind of going ahead, do shop around, do talk to some different installers, because that's really important in finding the kind of right product, the right installer for your home. But the process really could not be easier. And from our kind of initial kind of interim evaluation of the scheme, we found that kind of 86% of property owners were really, really satisfied with how their kind of application and kind of receiving that grant, which is a really kind of good start on people taking part in that scheme.
And is it just any installers, or do you need to pick somebody specifically who's kind of set up to make the most of it?
Yes, if you're applying to the scheme, you do need to find a MCS, that stands for Micro Generation Certification Scheme.
I'm glad you remembered that and not me.
I say it many times in my day job. But what they are is they're an organisation who sets standards, both in terms of the kind of installation standards, but also in terms of kind of your relationship with the installer. And what they do is they ensure that you're getting a good quality installation that's designed correctly and installed correctly for your home. It's really, really easy to find an installer. If you go onto the MCS website, they have a Find Your Installer tool in which you can use that to find local installers in your area. Also, similarly, if you have a product in mind, a specific product, Mitsubishi, you can go onto their websites and they're also kind of MCS certified and can apply to the scheme.
Yeah. And how much do you think it's about, picking a specific product? I mean, they're such a technical, most of us aren't going to necessarily know where to start picking a product, and how much of it is about finding a good installer who you can trust to make those decisions for you and get everything set up?
Well, I mean, your installer's got to be accredited anyway. And they need to be professional. It's no different to having a gas boiler replacement. In some ways. You want someone that you trust who's going to do proper installation in your home. You don't want the technology to go wrong. So it's one of the challenges of the industry, really, that Mitsubishi do a huge amount of work to train installers and actually make that transition. We've got a lot of, I was going to say plumbers, but I'm supposed to say gas engineers now, but gas engineers who actually want to make the transition themselves because they realise the industry is going in that direction. So Mitsubishi train thousands and thousands of engineers every year at their headquarters. And how many facilities have you got now? I think you've got
We've got 5 training facilities.
Where you can sign up for the courses and be trained and retrained. The other good thing as well is that your system's fully connected up back to Mitsubishi, so they've got an app which can monitor exactly what's happening with your air source heat pump, and you can do troubleshooting even remotely. So the office, they can literally dial into your system and see whether you're making use of it, efficiency, and whether you're tapping into the cheaper energy prices. And if there's ever a technical issue, which, let's be honest, at the end of the day, there might always be an issue, they can do all that troubleshooting remotely before they call out an engineer. But it's pretty simple technology, I mean, it kind of reminds me a little bit when I see people being hesitant and doubtful about it now, where people go, is it going to work that well? Is it going to be efficient? Is it going to really heat my home? Well, we would design that system and check and make sure that it does before the installation happens. So your rooms are sized, your radiators are sized. We look at your pipe sizes to make sure we get the flow rates right. We then specify the unit that you're going to need. Then do you need a 200-litre storage tank or a 250-litre, depending on how much water you're going to be using. So all of that's done. But I remember when my granddad was asked to put in his first ever gas boiler in the 1960s, because we literally just lived off coal. We just had coal fires in all the bedrooms. My granddad thought it was absolutely bonkers that you would have a gas pipe coming into your house and then a naked flame that you could see in the boiler all the time. He used to go in there and light his cigarettes sometimes off that naked flame because it didn't even have a cover on it. So if you just think like back to those days of let's put a gas pipe into your house and let's have a naked flame going all the time that's just going to trigger and ignite your boiler. My granddad thought it was nuts. He thought it was bonkers. So when I told him about air source heat pumps, he went, thank God for that. Like that, how can that be a dangerous system? It's just an element that captures some heat from the air, heats up that element, and then heats up your hot water. Yeah. So this is way simpler.
Yeah.
It's actually really, really, really simple technology. Mm-hmm. When you look at the kit that's in that unit, it's not that complicated, really, in the grand scheme of things. And I certainly feel much safer having an air source heat pump in my house than a gas boiler.
And do they, I mean, in terms of like the day-to-day running of one, like I don't have one in my home. George, you've got one, and Russ, you've lived with one as well. I wondered if there's anything kind of wise words of wisdom you could share about just spending, you know, how is it to live with it? Are you making a lot of changes? Are you doing a lot of scheduling? Does it just kind of look after itself?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's as simple as what a standard unit that you would have to do your heating now. You know, hot water on, heating on, setting your temperature. I think what's more intelligent about it now is that with it all being connected up to your iPhone, you can control it remotely. So there are, especially in my job when I'm away a lot, sometimes my diary can change last minute. So I'll just go into the system and turn it down or turn it off. And there's lots of pre-programmed settings anyway to give you peace of mind that you hardly ever have to touch it. So it's a very, very light touch.
Yeah.
In terms of looking after it. Obviously, the more efficient you are with it, the more money you're going to save. There's no point in heating your house if you don't need the heat to be there at that time. So it's got all the standard stuff you'd be familiar with, you know, peak times, off-peak times, holiday modes and things like that. But the nice thing is it's a system that operates at a relatively simple low temperature. It's a bit like... I don't have a kettle in my house. I've not had a kettle in my house for like 8 years. I've got one of those hot water boiling taps. And it's just really, really good because my kettle was one of the biggest energy consumers in my house. It takes an amazing amount of energy.
You must drink a lot of tea.
Well, honestly, the amount of energy it takes to boil a kettle of water from being a stagnant, room temperature to being at 100 degrees. And to do that in, a minute and a half? It's unbelievable how much energy that uses. And I was like, that's just bonkers. So I've got that unit that sits under my sink. And it monitors how much I'm using it. It's got into a pattern. It's intelligently realized how much I need hot water. And so that all it's doing is just using a tiny little bit of energy to just top up the water tank, which holds I think it's like 6 litres, 7 litres under my sink. And so when I go to get boiling water, it's there every time that I need it. But it's not having surge after surge after surge after surge of energy through the day. It's just using a tiny, tiny little bit of electricity to just top the temperature up. And then you've got this massively insulated unit under my sink, which is keeping that hot water at boiling temperature all day long. My energy bills have reduced just by having that bit of kit. So it's kind of similar in some ways to an air source heat pump. It's a more gentle, softer way of heating your home. It's not just come in, flick it on, your gas boiler fires up, blast loads and loads of heat into the system. Your room feels cold, so you turn your thermostat up to 22 degrees, and it's high intensive heat really quickly. Then you get too hot and you start turning it down again. Mm-hmm. All of that is massively inefficient.
Yeah.
The way of doing this, it's a gentler, softer, more intelligent way of heating your home.
Yeah. Someone mentioned earlier underfloor heating, which I believe is a really good kind of sister of an air source heat pump. That's a really, again, a very efficient way to heat your home. You mentioned potentially bigger radiators. Are there other things that when people are doing renovations, if you're doing a new kitchen, you're doing other projects around the house, even if your boiler is perfectly fine now, you're not planning a heat pump right now, what could you do as part of another renovation to make sure you're getting ready for whatever comes next?
First of all, look at your insulation. What insulation have you got in your loft? That's incredibly important. Cavity wall insulation, obviously double glazing if you haven't got it already. Even, I think, George, you've got triple glazing on, right?
I've got triple glazing in my house, yeah. I mean, I did triple glazing mainly for acoustics, because I live in London and I'm on quite a busy, noisy street, but it's brilliant. And look, even if you've just got the double glazing, that's fine. It's single glazing or having drafty sash windows that are letting air leak in or out. That's the bad stuff. If you've got double glazing with decent amount of insulation in your house, and your radiators have been sized properly anyway, even for your gas boiler system, the transition to an air source heat pump should be relatively straightforward. I think everybody thinks, oh, we might have to take all my radiators out and make them 50% bigger. Well, if your house is really badly insulated and you've got really leaky cold windows, yes, you might have to change your radiators and make them bigger because your system's going to be struggling anyway. But that's quite rare that we have to do that. You know, if rooms have been sized appropriately anyway, irrespective of your existing system, the air source heat pump system should just tap straight into it.
But also look at who your energy supplier is. So
Yeah.
there's lots of energy suppliers have time of use tariffs. So energy prices, wholesale prices fluctuate every 30 minutes. And if you look at some of the energy companies, they offer really, really good deals for cheap energy on time of use tariffs. That sinks in really well with using heat pumps and energy efficient technology. But who you get your energy from is really important.
Yeah, I would say that, well, as the energy editor, which is always the advice that I give to people is, yeah, if you're running any kind of technology like that, an electric car, a heat pump, you really don't want to be paying kind of standard rate electricity tariffs because there are so many options out there that can make them much, much cheaper to run. So yeah, definitely check in with your energy provider.
Yeah, and I was just going to say on that, like, it's one of those things that you can do now. Like, if you are thinking about having a heat pump in the future, that might be a couple of years down the line from kind of a financial point of view. But things like smart tariffs, they're available to pretty much everyone, and they can make a huge impact on your monthly bill. So do look at smart tariffs. If you're looking at heat pump, look at those heat pump tariffs. But it's quite an easy switch that you can make as a household and just saves you that kind of extra cash each month. Yeah, so do that.
It's I mean, I genuinely love the technology, by the way. So you're probably just thinking, oh, he's really biased because he works for Mitsubishi. I'm part of this campaign basically because I really believe in it, and I think it's the direction that we should all be going in. And when I travel around Europe, particularly in places like Scandinavia, and when I spend time in Denmark and in Germany, they think it's bonkers that we don't have more air source heat pumps. They've been doing it for years and years. It's just so standard. So standard for them. And particularly if you're living in a remote area where you might be burning oil, you might have an oil-fired boiler because you don't have a gas supply. I mean, the cost of oil is going through the roof and it's just going to get more and more and more expensive. So if you're living in a remote place with an oil-fired boiler, you should definitely be putting in an air source heat pump. But we have a bit of kit on the stand, and it's a little toolkit. And it just takes a few minutes. You can just put some of your details in about what type of house you live in, how much it's insulated, you know, whether it's 3 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, 6 bathrooms, whatever it might be. You put in your region of where you are, because then we're working out kind of roughly what the temperature might be in that area. And also we need to connect you up to local installers who might be in that area. And it comes up with the stats. Of course, it's very kind of generic. If you did want to go forward with a specific installation, we'd send an engineer out to do a proper design and proper calculations for you. But it's pretty accurate as a piece of kit. It works out roughly what your existing carbon emissions might be if you're doing a gas boiler or an oil-fired boiler. It works out the efficiencies that you would have if you went to an air source heat pump, and it works out the cost saving for the installation and how much carbon emissions you're going to be giving out each year in comparison with your existing system. Just go on there. It literally takes 5 minutes. It takes 5 minutes, and you should just do it and have a look at it and see how efficient it's going to be. I think it might just kind of sow a seed in your mind that if you are thinking about changing your gas boiler at some point, I would obviously say just do it. But I just think it's bonkers in this day and age. If you've got a house and you've got a gas boiler, and your gas boiler is getting a bit tired and a little bit knackered, and any gas boiler, by the way, that's 10 years old, even if it still works, it's not going to be efficient. You know, you probably haven't had it serviced in its entire life because you don't legally need to do it. It's funny, isn't it, how we get our car serviced every year or get an MOT every year by law to check that it's all safe, but we don't have to legally get our gas boiler checked. So you've got this gas thing with a flame in it that ignites that you've never, ever, ever had checked. I never had my gas boiler checked. I just didn't do it because it's working. You only ever get it sorted out when it breaks. But even if your gas boiler is 10 years old and it still works, I promise you it will be really, really inefficient. The components and the parts in there will not be working as well than the day that you bought it. So you might only be getting like 60% efficiency out of it compared to when it was new. But it's because what you're used to, you just think, oh, I'll just carry on using it, carry on using it. Then when it breaks, you look at replacing it. When it does break, please, 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 just look at air source heat pumps and see if it's going to work.
It can be really difficult to know where to start. If you're in a home, you are thinking about potentially getting changed your heat system. Maybe you are having a boiler service, so you ask them for some advice. So where... also a plug from me, the Which website does have a lot of advice on this, and also a tool that you can put in all your details about, again, how much energy you use, what your home is currently set up as. You can put your postcode in so it gets hold of your EPC and all of that, and then it will tell you, okay, well, here's a list of things that you might be able to do that might be interesting: solar panels, heat pumps, other types of insulation. But it can be, imagine you're in a position, you're thinking about it. Who do you ask? Where do you go to? There are energy retrofit people, surveys you can do, which I think are quite expensive, but if you're serious about it, it can be a good place to start. Do you guys have any recommendations of who should we be asking about all of this technology and making sure we're making the right choice for the home that we're in?
I think just start by Googling it, because there's so much information out there. But what I would say is you won't get lost, because there's lots of simple tools. Like George just talked about our simple tool. It'll probably take you 4 minutes to put some data in about your house, to size your heat pump, to understand how much it's going to cost to run it, how much CO2 you'll save by running it, and then go straight through to an installer. Which you've got a tool.
Yeah, we've got one.
Mitsubishi Electric isn't the only manufacturer.
Nesta's got one.
Yeah. So there's a lot of simple tools, and I guess the industry, the government, we're working really hard to make it really simple for people to make that journey.
Yeah.
I think you'd also go to... There's lots of environmental designers out there who will look at every aspect of your house. So obviously we've talked a lot today about air source heat pumps, and there are ground source heat pumps. We haven't talked about solar panels and battery storage or any of that stuff. We haven't talked about little mini wind turbines that you could have next to your house as well. So there's lots and lots of different options and ways of doing it. So you could get like an environmental design consultant to come around and look at your house holistically, and then they could recommend suppliers that you could go to. I think the reason why I kind of bang the drum so hard for air source heat pumps, like a solar panel is a brand new bit of kit. Do you know what I mean? You've already got a bit of kit in your house, which is a gas boiler. And I'm just trying to encourage people to not replace it with another gas boiler and go to cheaper, cleaner, better forms of energy for your house. But obviously, if you can do all of that, if you can insulate your home more and have that fabric-first approach, if you can have solar panels on your roof and you have some battery storage, that's going to harness all of that energy to then power your air source heat pump and all your lighting. Yeah. That's like win, 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 win.
Yeah.
And you can get there. It's not that difficult.
Yeah. And you also don't have to do it all at the same time. It doesn't need to be a big kind of 20 grand project all in 1 year. You can kind of add these things gradually. Maybe 1 year you're doing a kitchen, so you put some underfloor heating in. The next year is solar panels. The next, so you can kind of build up to it.
I think just about advice, I think as both kind of George and Russ have said, that there's loads of websites out there that can give you information, tools that you can kind of work out whether your home is suitable. I think a lot of the time we just need somebody who's living with a heat pump to say, this is how it is. And obviously George has done a fantastic job today, but he does work with Mitsubishi. And you're all these people up here, they're experts in this. But I want to talk to somebody who's like me, who doesn't know about these technologies. And there are ways to do that. So Nesta, they have a visit my heat pump
that's a great scheme.
So you can go
into a heat pump.
Yeah, you can go into people who are happy with their heat pumps. They sign up on the website and they open their homes for people to come in to see the heat pump in their properties and to experience and see what it's like. And I think that's a really, really great scheme for people to just kind of understand that lived experience. So even if you're not ready to have kind of a full assessment of your property and kind of push the button on making this change, go and visit a heat pump, see what it's like, really get that kind of positive feedback, because what you'll see in the news is constant negative stuff about heat pumps. But if you actually talk to people who have heat pumps in their homes, they are happy with it, they are content, they are having a better experience than they had with their gas boiler. Because as George said, the vast majority are very inefficient and are not properly heating your homes. Whereas
and are
heat pumps
expensive to
can
run.
do that. So even if you're not ready for that kind of technical part of the kind of heat pump journey, go and see one. Yes, it's great. You can go and see one today on the stand, but it's obviously different in the kind of home. So do look out for that.
It's tricky because we believe in it and we love it and we see the difference that it makes. So we even try not to do the hard sell, even though I probably have done the hard sell today. We try not to do that. And what I love about Mitsubishi Electric is they're like industry leaders. And there's times they'll say, look, obviously they would love people to buy a Mitsubishi Ecodan air source heat pump, but the number of times Russ has said to me, look, if people go and buy other ones, that's fine as well. We just want to help everyone make the transition to air source heat pumps and start coming off gas, because we do genuinely believe in how good it is. But you're right, it's a really, really valid point. Most of the people who buy an air source heat pump have bought one because they've got a friend or a member of their family that's just taken one on. And so they trust them more than they trust people like us because they think we're doing the hard sell. I've got like 3 or 4 mates who've done it in the last couple of years, just because I've had mine now for 6 years, 7 years. And they walk in and it's in my front garden, and they're like, some of them think it's air conditioning. What's that? Oh, you've got aircon in your house. That's a bit fancy. And I'm like, no. And I've got to explain it. And they're like, well, I don't get it. And so I explain it again. And then 6 months later, they're like, do you know what? I was thinking we might do it. And they spend the money and do it.
And it's how noisy is it? Because that is what we hear.
People should not worry about that at all. Like genuinely. If everyone just thinks it's like when you've got an air conditioning unit outside your house, or you've gone on holiday to Spain and you put the aircon on and that unit is buzzing and buzzing. Don't get me wrong, it would drive me nuts that. If that was the case, I would not have one outside my house, right? I just wouldn't do it. I'm really sensitive to noise, and stuff like that would drive me crazy. And the model I've got, I even went for the ultra quiet model. But most of the other, that was 6 years ago that I got that model. I think most of them are up at the ultra quiet level anyway. Yes, if you walk out of your house and you walk past the unit, you will just very, very quietly hear the fan going. But it's not really the fan that you're hearing, it's the air. It's the sound of the air going across the fan as it's drawing it in. I just never noticed it. Genuinely never noticed it. So it is not like your preconceived idea of having a noisy kind of whirring unit outside your house like an air conditioning system.
Good to hear. We don't have heaps of time left. I was wondering if is there anyone in the audience that might have a question that you'd like to ask? I think there is someone with a mic.
Howdy.
Oh, yep, here we are.
Just wait for the mic to come for you, and then if you can
Hello, sir.
introduce yourself.
Okay. Yeah, I have a question. Since we've got the experts and you see what's coming up, if you live in a high-rise, say a 3-story high-rise with 20 apartments in it, I think trying to get a heat pump to function at the moment for that is not really feasible. Are you working on that? Is there plans for the future?
So the first thing I'd say, yeah, the traditional heat pump you're thinking of that's taking water around your radiator systems probably isn't feasible, but we have an air-to-air system heat pump. So it's very, very similar to your air conditioning system, and it's going to be able to, you have indoor units in your house, and it will heat and cool your apartment and your flat. And that's the perfect solution for that, yeah.
Have we got time for any other questions?
Yep, sure, we've got a few minutes still.
Down here.
Few minutes, about 5 minutes maybe, yeah.
Hi, if I'm looking to convert my system to
Can you just hold it a little bit closer?
if I'm looking to convert my system to the heat pumps, do I have to change my radiators as well?
No.
Nice
Good
and
question.
quick.
Nice answer,
Genuinely,
right?
you don't. If hand on heart, if those radiators are the right size for the room anyway, then you shouldn't have to change them. If your existing radiators have been, I'm going to say, badly designed by the plumbing installer and they were undersized, when one of our designers comes around, engineers, does the heat loss calculations and the heat provisions about the volume and size of your room, they might say, to be honest, that radiator's been undersized for your room anyway, irrespective of whether you've got an air source heat pump. We would recommend that you put a new one in that's 2.5 foot longer.
Yeah, I suppose because the water in the radiator will be a little bit cooler than potentially it is. It depends what your current flow temperature is, but it might end up being a little bit cooler. But as George said, it will depend on what you've got already.
And I think it also goes to what Russ was saying about the kind of what you're comfortable with in terms of the efficiency of that system, and then ultimately the costs you're paying on a month by month basis for your bills. You could go for a kind of a higher temperature system where you remain with kind of smaller radiators, but ultimately what you'll see kind of on a month-to-month basis will probably be higher than if you make a transition where you kind of install much larger radiator systems. It runs at that flow temperature, is a higher efficiency than your monthly bill is smaller. So there's lots of kind of decisions, and obviously your installer who's modelling your property, designing that system will be able to kind of set out to you those kind of trade-offs, I guess, in terms of the kind of upfront costs and renovations against that kind of longer-term kind of running and benefits of your system.
Yeah, it's also about just using the system in a much gentler way. I say this to people who put underfloor heating in their house. So irrespective of what your boiler might be, whether it's an air source heat pump or a gas boiler, if you've got underfloor heating in your house, every single time my clients, when we do the house up, and I keep saying to them, don't put your thermostat up to 22 degrees like you normally do, right? They're normally at 21, 22 degrees. I'm like, just put it down to 18 or 19 maximum and let it run slightly longer during the day. So it's a lower temperature, but it's a gentler form of heat coming through. Because in effect, when you've got underfloor heating, your radiator is the size of the entire floor. Where before you put that in, your radiator might just be like a 3-meter long thing at the other end of the room, give an ununiform heat distribution through your space. Do you see what I mean? And also because the heat's down there, it's just very gently radiating up throughout the room, right? So you don't need to run your system at 21, 22 degrees. Therefore, you're saving money because it's, again, coming back to my kettle analogy, if you want to blast heat, maximum heat, really quickly, it's more expensive for you to run. If you go in and put your gas boiler on and put your radiators up to 22, blast it, heat them up, get too hot, turn it down again, that is unbelievably expensive and inefficient way to run. So with an air source heat pump system, even if you've got slightly undersized radiators, and it would be a decision that you'd have to make. They would say to you, we'd recommend you want to change them and make them a bit bigger if they are undersized. Or they could say, you might just want to turn the thermostat up a little bit to get that heat through because your radiators are a bit smaller, but you don't have to change them. And as Russ mentioned before, there's now a model, it's called the R32. I'm not going to bore you with it. But the R32 is given temperatures at over 70 degrees rather than 45, 50 degrees. So an R32 in your house would probably work better. And I haven't even seen it, but I'm just guessing that if you wanted maximum heat, but still run it at a gentler temperature, your radiators would be able to do it.
Thanks. We have time for one more down there?
Yeah, so we do 2 very quick fire questions. That'd be great.
Yeah, nice and quick answers.
This is a bit of a curveball question, actually. Why has not more been done for people to either convert their houses into passive house or build more passive houses? Because you don't actually...
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. Building a passive house is not easy. So I don't know if you know what a passive house is, but a passive house is an incredibly well-sealed house. You know, very, 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 very well sealed. And then you have to have forms of kind of air and heat recovery system to keep the air fresh inside your home. It's really difficult. It's an interesting question because the guy I mentioned before who did the building home project for me, he was working like mad because he was desperate to make his house passive house. And it was so difficult. I mean, you have to tape. If there's like a 0.5 millimeter gap anywhere in your house is no longer passive house standard. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it. I do think that it's really difficult for people to get a passive house standard, especially if you've got an existing building. A new build passive house is really straightforward because you're starting from scratch. But to retrofit to get a passive house, to make it fully sealed with not a single draft anywhere is virtually impossible.
But I suppose a good point is that, it definitely doesn't need to be that, you don't need to be insulated to that level for an air source heat pump to be very, very efficient.
Don't get me wrong, new build passive house, I'm a massive fan of because I think it's cost effective. But other than that, I think it's really, really difficult to do, especially in an existing building. All you need to do is just insulate your building really, really, really well, get rid of drafts as much as you possibly can, and put in a good clean energy system that's a gentle form of heat rather than a very powerful form of heat. And you'll be still miles ahead of the curve compared to what other existing buildings are doing at the minute.
Nice.
Thanks. I think if we try and wrap up, I would just very, very quickly like to ask the panel if you had just one really quick tip for anyone who is thinking about an air source heat pump, either right now or in the future. 10 seconds or less.
take advantage of the government grants.
Get free money from the government.
There is £7,500 free there for you to make the transition. Take it, make the most of it.
Yeah, and it's completely you're not tied into anything. Don't need to give it
anything.
back.
It is a grant
Straight
which,
to you.
as Rose said, there's nothing to pay back. It's money there.
Yeah.
So take advantage of it. Do your research.
Perfect. Russ, what's yours?
I was going to say that, but just to touch on that, that is the best scheme throughout Europe. There is no better scheme or incentive from a government in Europe. So it's really good, and it won't be there forever. It's a lot of money up front.
Yeah.
I guess for me is do a bit of research and find an installer that you trust. Listen to what they have to say. The more knowledge they give you, the more they could be trusted. Mm-hmm. Make sure they're accredited. That's what I would suggest.
Thank you. And George, 10 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, mine would be, whether it's Mitsubishi Electric or any other very, very good manufacturer, just get in touch. Just get in touch because...
Get some quotes, see what
Mitsubishi Electric will put you in touch with good local installers that have been approved and accredited. So that's going to give you peace of mind. And you've got to remember that companies like Mitsubishi Electric genuinely don't want to do the hard sell and then sell you something that's going to underperform and not work, right? Because if we just get 10 stories in the Daily Mail saying, I've got an air source heat pump system and it's rubbish and it doesn't work, that's just not good for the industry at all. We don't want that. If an air source heat pump will not work with your house for whatever reason, Mitsubishi will tell you straight away and say, once you've upgraded your insulation and improved the thermal performance of your house, come back to us because then it's going to work.
Perfect.
So none of us want to do a dodgy installation for this technology at all.
I think I'm being nodded at. I think is that it?
That's great. What a great discussion. Round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen. Terrific.
Thanks so much.